In 1775, Thomas Paine wrote a pamphlet stating that the freedoms of man can only be maintained by limiting the power of government. The pamphlet was called Common Sense. In 2015, it still is Common Sense. Your host,
I'm Mark Zaccaria, and this is Common Sense. Welcome back. In this segment, we'll hear from Michael Cerullo, a longtime drug counselor, and he asked the question, what's the rush, Rhode Island? We can sit back and watch Colorado's experience with legalized marijuana before having to make our own choices in that critical area. We'll also hear from Jeff Richard. He'll fill us in on the problem of $2.8 billion worth of fraudulent IRS refunds, and really what it means to you. Oh yes, we'll also ask the question, are you kidding me? But first, the news and some of how it impacts you. Governor Raimondo announces a Rethinking Medicaid work group to try and hunt one of the many 800-pound gorillas in the room. Common Sense applauds the governor for her recognition of the enormous cash hemorrhage that is Rhode Island's stewardship of the Medicaid program. It is especially pleasing to see her willing to make a public statement that identifies the current costs as unsustainable. She's right. The question on all of our lips is, what's your next move, Governor? In its release announcing the formation of the new work group, the administration mentioned the transition from a fee-for-service model to one of coordinated care. I trust the governor's press office understands that Rhode Island already uses coordinated care as an approach for much of its Medicaid oversight today. I hope the policymakers are aware that using this model requires private sector contractors to do the actual patient-caregiver balancing. Cha-ching! I really hope that they know that different contractors use different formularies or lists of covered medications. That means two different patients can and do have quite different Medicaid experiences depending on which of the health insurers they are assigned to for coordination. I really, really hope that the public policy officials realize that today Rite Aid is offered to people in the Ocean State without regard to their status as citizens or even permanent residents here. That means, as a sanctuary state, folks from around the nation make their way here to get the free health care that comes without copay. The governor's new work group will soon learn that Katie Beckett respite care is routinely awarded to the parents of children who are also full-time students in public schools. Maybe those moms and dads might not really need 40 more hours a week of relief from the strain of parenting. The work group will also find that despite the fact that Rite Aid and all other RI Medicaid recipients have been assigned a primary care physician, the great majority still use higher-priced emergency room care for even routine treatment. The point is that the governor's press release is a fine first step and a good political move. To really solve the problem, though, the Rethinking Medicaid work group is really going to have to do some work. Then the governor will have to really spend some political capital with one constituent group in order to provide the needed relief for her budget and the other constituent group that funds it. Common Sense wishes her Godspeed in that effort. And now an update to the Deepwater Wind story. Robert Shields, chairman of Deepwater Resistance, led a group of concerned citizens in an effort to stop Deepwater Wind back in 2013. Last week he opined in the Independent RI how the Block Island wind farm is still a bad idea, and I quote, "We successfully defeated plans to lay the transmission cable under Narragansett Town Beach and overhead through the piers, roads, and parkland. We took a complaint on the excess cost to the state superior and Supreme Courts in an effort to kill the proposal completely, but were unsuccessful, although not for lack of trying. I will never understand the ruling of no standing handed down. Apparently, neither court was willing to recognize a $600 million excess cost to ratepayers, $700 million if the submarine cable is included, constituted a valid argument. In my opinion, Deepwater Wind had extraordinary influence on the courts, and the courts had no compunction to hear the arguments presented on behalf of me and all electricity ratepayers in Rhode Island," said Shields. Who were the true culprits in this process? We know Ann Livingston, the State Coastal Resource Management Council Subcommittee's chairwoman, explicitly stated economics would not be considered at the hearings. The council's lawyer, Brian Goldman, agreed with her decision, and Grover Fugate, executive director, also publicly assented. Apparently, that's all it takes for CRMC to ignore its own Ocean Special Area Management Plan requirements. We are justified to conclude these three were culpable in subverting an obligation to consider net economic impact. The worst of it was that the CRMC staff report revealed itself to be without the financial and engineering expertise to scrutinize this proposal, as the OSAMP or OSAMP, stipulates. For years, New England has unintentionally placed itself in an energy stranglehold from constricted natural gas pipeline capacity from the west and hydropower transmission capacity from Quebec, and coincidentally, the permanent shutdown of nuclear and 3 large coal-fired power stations. Deepwater Wind's day has come and gone. It's gone because New England's governors now belatedly seek to eliminate these bottlenecks and actually lower the cost of power. Manufacturers, particularly those who belong to Rhode Island Manufacturers Association and Rhode Island Public Expenditure Council, will be pleased with this development, but we can't be complacent, unquote. Despite looming deficits, Rhode Island's political leadership keeps paying bills it does not need to pay. This month, without fanfare, the General Treasurer made a $2.2 million payment on the bonds issued to lure 38 studios to Providence. After that payment, there's still some $74 million left to go on this debt that we don't actually owe. $14.6 million of that is interest, and our next scheduled payment in November is $9.2 million. All this has to be seen against the backdrop of a state operating deficit of more than $100 million just this year, and an obligation for pension and other post-employment benefits, which is many times that annual shortfall. Once again, we are throwing good money after bad. And it's good money we don't really have. The 38 Studios financing deal was rushed through in secret. The bonds were specifically designed as not the responsibility of the state treasury, if only to make their issuance more palatable. We even paid extra for an insurance policy to cover the costs to bondholders in the event 38 Studios couldn't pay. And yet, here we are. Now we have deals on tap for a boondoggle baseball stadium, a demonstration of wind power for which all of us will have to pony up triple our regular electric bills, and a brand new State Department of Commerce that is already budgeted for 10 times its original estimate. Political leadership threatens that unless we make good on the 38 Studios deal, no investor will ever buy Rhode Island bonds again. That's not true. If our bonds stop selling, it won't be because of one fiscally irresponsible act by state government. It will be because all of them taken together as an indication of the lousy job we do running our state. Leadership will not learn that lesson unless the voters do and make their politicians pay in a way that really hurts at the ballot box. When is a clunker not actually a clunker? Why, when municipalities need to increase revenue. Recently, Channel 10 News did an extensive expose of instances where the valuation of older automobiles increases year over year, despite the fact that cars have a lower Blue Book value and more miles. How could that be? Easy. The higher valuation for 10-year-old junkers results in higher bills for their owner's automobile property tax. Is this reverse engineering? Do our cities and towns decide in advance how much they need to take in from car tax and then set valuations accordingly? That very process has been accused for years on the property taxes assessed for buildings. If it's true, it is just like the tip of the iceberg. The finagling of car taxes is a symptom of the fact that municipalities are forced to make expenditures without any management authority by the state, while they are simultaneously restricted by the state from using other sources of income. State laws mandating maintenance of effort for public school systems have the same effect as state laws mandating binding arbitration. They take management authority away from the city and town governments. We are told that businesses have no incentive to relocate to Rhode Island. The management of public resources for the benefit of special interests rather than for the general good is a big reason the economic environment here is so bleak. There is work to be done to get the Ocean State back on firm financial footing. When we do it, though, the benefits we'll all get will go far beyond a break on the property tax for aging automobiles. You may not think it's news that the state Senate is trying to break the bank when it comes to entitlements, but it is happening. Again. Are you kidding me? Senate Bill 467, sponsored by Senator Goodwin, seeks to extend the benefit of low-income assistance with child care expenses to families in Rhode Island making $90,000 per year and more. Every time that threshold for services was ratcheted up, our state's operating deficit is increased right along with it. We're a very generous society which doesn't begrudge the needy among us a helping hand, but most of the hard-working, tax-paying men and women of Rhode Island who put up the cash for these helping handouts make less than 90 grand. If there's some justification for public assistance to folks at that lofty income level, can you please explain it to us, Senator Goodwin? Or at least stop calling it low-income assistance. Are you kidding me?
Welcome to Common Sense Rhode Island. This is a program where we try to make sense out of the policies that affect your life and come up with common sense solutions. And today we have Mike Cerullo with us. He is an independently licensed clinical mental health counselor in private practice, and you've practiced for 18 years, treated over 1,000 adolescents, young adults and their families who have had problems with drug use. And you're also a co-convener of What's the Rush Rhode Island, which is a grassroots volunteer movement involved in this debate over whether to legalize marijuana or not. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you very much, Patricia. I feel very welcome.
Good. You are. Tell us first, What's the Rush Rhode Island?
Well, What's the Rush Rhode Island is a volunteer grassroots movement. It's a group of people. We have an agronomy professor from URI, Bob Hodling, who is the director of the East Greenwich drug program, and a retired pharmacist. And the four of us are co-conveners of this group. We've put together a website with a lot of research associated with it. And we have, our goal is to, we believe very strongly, our first position is we believe very, very strongly that Rhode Island does not need to make this decision right now. Given that we've got Colorado's experiment, which is only 1.5 years old, and Washington State, and Oregon, and Alaska as petri dishes out there, we need to learn from them. Ted Levitt, back in my marketing
The good and
days,
the bad in those states so we can react to it.
Absolutely. And you know, it's about imitative innovation, as Ted Levitt from Harvard Business School back in the 70s used to talk about it. You're not, somebody comes up with a new product. Well, we're going to imitate that innovation. Well, what he said was, that's a good idea, but the first thing you got to do is make sure you don't make the mistakes that they made.
Same mistakes, sure.
Okay, hidden costs, liabilities of scale. There are huge liabilities of scale associated with this if you really understand the complexities of this situation. And you want to make sure that you're prepared to deal with, or you recognize that the second guy in is going to institute a price war. Okay, the people who've invested in this for as long as the black market has done it, and that's who the competition is really.
The black market is our competition.
That's who Colorado is competing with right now, and it's not working. They think, or they thought it was going to go away. It hasn't. And that's an example. I can get into much more detail down the road.
So your position is we've got these 4 other states that have already legalized. Mm-hmm. Let's watch them, find out what problems they have from the legalization.
Stop, look,
and we can maybe plan for those.
Yeah. This is according, Bob Hodling, who runs the drug program, says this is the way that we're approaching this right now is it's like releasing the kraken on a kite string and expecting that we're going to be able to control this monsters or potentially monsters flight.
Yeah.
Nobody knows for sure how to do that yet.
Yeah, we don't have to rush in.
Stop, look, listen.
Okay. One of the positions on your website is that we should have a detailed fiscal impact statement. So that includes regulatory, medical, all those kinds of costs that might be associated with legalizing marijuana. Do you want to expand upon that a bit? Okay.
Well, this proposal has been in place for 5 years. It's been brought to your legislature for 5 years. There has yet been to be a fiscal statement associated with this proposal. Nobody's presented what the regulatory costs are going to be. Nobody's presented what the increased public safety.
Dangle up the revenue, the tax revenue.
Correct. And certainly Governor Hickenlooper's pointed out that it isn't going the way they originally pointed out. He thinks it was a big mistake to have done it.
Hickenlooper is the governor of Colorado.
He actually recommended it to his colleagues once to not do it. Let's find out how we're doing.
He regrets it.
He actually made that. He actually made that recommendation. So this fiscal impact statement is really important because there are things that will impact downstream and add to the structural deficit, in my opinion. For example, we know that there's going to be an increase in addiction treatment costs. We know already that there are healthcare implications, 30, 40 years out in some cases, that are going to be the result of increased access and increased use of marijuana. So this fiscal impact statement needs to happen. We need to consider these, project these potential costs downstream, as well as the immediate costs. We need to learn from their experience. And a responsible thing to do from our point of view, is to help these 113 people who are going to make this decision learn everything possible about this very, very complex issue. And that's our goal. There are actually people who are proponents, who are members. We have who have endorsed our positions. We have undecided people who have endorsed our positions, as well as a large number of people, admittedly, who are opposed to this under any circumstances. But all of us agree. What's the rush, Rhode Island?
Yeah.
What's another 5 years? When you think about it, 5 years.
Give us time.
Give us the time
get all of
to
the
really
information.
learn and really make the right decisions for the future generations, because this will have an impact on future generations in Rhode Island.
And so your third point on the website is that along with legalization, there also has to be a permanent funding source for treatment.
Absolutely. We know, for example, that 10% of the youth who are not now using have said, and this is nationally, national studies have said, that in the event it's legalized, 10% of them have said that they will try it again. They've not either tried again or they will experiment with it. People who never used it.
These are students
These
or
are
children
students.
who say, no, it's illegal, I
Right.
don't want to get into trouble.
Right. And now what they're saying is, if you legalize it, I'll give it a shot. So we know that if 1 in 10 of those people,
10%
1 in
to
6,
16%.
10% to 16% are going to eventually become addicted. That's a huge percentage of people to add to what we already have in terms of lifetime usage among 7 to 12 to 17-year-olds, which is in the 30% range. 30% of eighth graders to high school seniors have used marijuana at least once in their life. And that means they've been intoxicated. And we know 1 in 6 to 1 in 10 of them will become addicted. So we need to have funding, and it's got to be permanent funding. It can't be like we've done it
in
the legislation. We can't let what happened with the tobacco.
Let the problem develop and then see where's the money, because there's no money.
What are the mechanisms? So far, none of the proponents, and this is even at a high-level forum we had just last week at Brown, that Brown Medical School conducted, and the major proponents of the bills, including Senator Miller, were not able to guarantee that there's a way to avoid what happened with the lottery funds back in my day, where we were told it was all going to be used for education, and it never happened. It never happened with tobacco settlement money more recently. We need a restricted receipt account that can't be changed by a subsequent legislator.
Well, unfortunately, we raid the restricted receipt accounts on a regular basis.
All the time. So if that doesn't happen, well, that's just going to add to the structural deficit. Everybody's saying marijuana.
Yeah, even the money that we come in.
It's going to go out.
Well,
it's not going to solve the problem. It's not going to
It's
solve
not
that problem.
going to pave our roads.
So we need to guarantee, if we're going to do this, and again, we've got to respect the fact that in Rhode Island, it's the General Assembly and the governor who make this decision. It's not a referendum item. So we need to make sure that we have this kind of funding ahead of us. If it's not there, it's what the Russia's position is. We won't support it. We can't support it. It's not a responsible thing to do.
We have to plan for the treatments.
Absolutely.
In the future.
And the prevention.
And the preventions. That's more of the preventions. All right, we're going to take a break right now and have one of our segments on You've Got to Be Kidding Me.
More information about Michael Cerullo, the organization he represents, What's the Rush, Rhode Island, and much more information about this subject, please go to www.what'stherush-ri.org.
When is a contract not a contract? When our state legislature says it isn't. Are you kidding me? All legally binding contracts have always contained two key features: the agreed terms by which the parties will abide and the duration of the agreement. Not so fast, first-year law students. Now come Senators McCaffrey, Chichone, Satchel, and Jabbour with their bill S-446. It stipulates that in the case of certified school teachers, any contract, once executed with them and for them, shall remain in effect in perpetuity unless a new contract be executed between the same parties. Consolidation or regionalization be damned. Municipalities or private institutions, no matter. Management rights? What are they? So what's really going on here? Schools, both public and private, have a tremendous incentive to reach successive contracts. They have businesses to run. They have customers to serve. But the teachers? Their one and only incentive to bargain in good faith is the possibility that if no new agreement is concluded, there will be no work. Now that the aforementioned senators have moved to make that unpleasant reality go away, the teachers and their unions have management right where they want them, over a barrel. Are you kidding me?
Hello, welcome to Common Sense. This is a program where we try to make sense out of the policies that affect your life.
Common Sense is on each week on Verizon Channel 34 or Cox Channel 15, Saturdays at 4 p.m., Sundays at 10 a.m. You can also find us online at www.commonsenseri.org. Join our host, Representative Patricia Morgan, each week as she brings you a variety of experts from the financial or small business community, government policy experts, town councilors, and members of our state General Assembly to discuss the issues that affect your life. We review the news of the week from our own perspective with Elizabeth Smith and Luis Vargas. We hear from Jeff Richard, who always brings us some interesting insight, and where we always ask the question, are you kidding me? So remember to join us on Verizon Channel 34 or Cox Channel 15, Saturdays at 4 p.m. and Sundays at 10 a.m., or online at www.commonsenseri.org, on Facebook and our YouTube channel, Common Sense, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter at CommonSenseRI.
Welcome back. We're sitting here with Mike Cerullo, who has done a lot of intensive research on marijuana and its effects on children, youth, families. But before we start talking about those effects, just tell me about the marijuana today.
So marijuana today is not our grandfather's marijuana. It's certainly not my generation's marijuana. What we know today is that it is about psychoactive ingredient, the one that gets us high, is about 10 times as strong, 5 to 10 times as strong as it was in those days. And the relationship between them, between the two most important ingredients, the THC and what are called the cannabinoids, which are the ones that are beneficial in the state of medical marijuana.
Yeah.
Okay, that has remained level at around 1 or 2%.
So the good stuff has stayed
Right,
the same,
right. And the stuff that gets us high, the bad stuff, the one that disorients us and so forth, that stuff is up to 10, 12, 22%. Okay, depending on which
So
strain
it's a genetically modified organism?
It's a genetically modified strain of THC.
And it's much, much more powerful than it used
And
to
then
be.
today, even that's not enough in terms of the highs. So it's generated what we call the butane hash oil, the honey. There are a number of names for it, shatter. The concentration of THC in those products is 90%. It is stuff that's really going to affect the brain. It affects the brain a great deal.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Yeah, you mentioned that it does affect people's brains, especially adolescents' brains. Right?
Absolutely.
So give us a little bit more information about that.
So what we need to do here is understand the way the brain works. First off, marijuana likes fat. It likes to go and store itself in fat. So you got to imagine that the brain is made up of billions of wires that get bundled up and go to various places in the brain, like your memory, like your emotional regulation, like the master computer chip that you have in the front of your brain that helps you make decisions like, this is the right thing to do, this is something that I should think about first. Right. The look
Affects
before
your
you
judgment,
leave.
yes.
Right. And so what happens is that these are not continuous wires, so to speak. There are trillions of little connections. You think about them as spark plug gaps, and they are the places where the real action takes place. This is where the neurotransmitters, the ones that keep us, like serotonin, that make us calm, dopamine, which helps us stay focused in school, or motivated, dopamine's involved in that. Dopamine's involved in psychotic experiences. So what happens in every kind of addiction is that those spark plug gaps, those connections, which you can think of as looking like this, those connections get hijacked. And they get tricked into believing you need more and more and more. This happens with alcohol, it happens with tobacco, it happens with cocaine, it happens with marijuana. Okay? Now, when that happens with marijuana, it's a little different from there, because what it does in marijuana is it plants itself in 5 important areas in the brain. And it stays there and it softens up the fatty layers that are out there on these wires called myelin. It softens it up, and it essentially
the protection to
that circuit,
nerve or
those neurons.
Yeah,
you're right, exactly. They get softened up, they get compromised over a period of time, and that creates a lot of problems as well. So, in the end, this is why, for example, in a urine screen, if somebody smoked this highly concentrated stuff, I can pick it up on a urine screen 30 days out.
It stays a long time in the.
It'll stay a long time. It's very slow to get out, depending on the concentration that's being used.
During all that time, it's kind of
wrapped
around these neurons or the.
It's softening the insulation that protects the charge, literally electric charge. So it's almost like it creates an environment for short circuits, so to speak. Okay. And what we know from brain science is that after a period of time, it will change blood flow in the brain. It will atrophy certain parts of the brain. That's never good. That's never good.
Okay. So what you're saying, because it stays there for such a long period of time and it keeps telling the brain that it needs more, it's addictive.
It will become addictive. It does become addictive.
But that's not what I hear from proponents.
Well, the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual that we all use in our world to identify mental health challenges and substance use challenges, which are part of that, that's been revised as of 2013. There had never been one between 1992 or so and 2013. And neuroscience didn't really come into its flowering until the early 90s. So what we have now are diagnoses and awarenesses that are based on neuroscience, in addition to the other things that we know. And the DSM-5 defines addiction, or substance use disorder, they don't use the word addiction in the same way anymore, as something that affects, it captivates, it takes over what's called the pleasure-reward system, one of those 5 zones where marijuana is, and it takes that over. It also is affecting something significantly in the major functioning areas in life. For example, emotional control problems, relationships, the ability to make a living, do your job, or for that matter, go to school for young people, physical health problems downstream. So if you've got a use situation and you've got an impact in those areas, you've got a substance use disorder. And then specifically in marijuana, there are 11 criteria. Okay, there are 6 diagnoses that are cannabis related now in the DSM-5. 3 of them are cannabis use disorder, what we would have called addiction, with 11 criteria, and that can be mild, moderate, or severe, cannabis intoxication, cannabis withdrawal. And then
I guess I'm more interested in, I know that you have told me that the people who use it chronically are more likely to be on welfare, less likely to hold a job.
Right. Huge study in New Zealand over a course of 25 years.
Not completing school.
Absolutely.
Less money earned in their lifetime.
Not completing school. There's only about 5%, 6% who've used it just 50 times. 50 times a year.
50 times a year.
So once a week over the course of 7 years. Okay?
And they really impair their lives.
It impairs their lives. 60% end up in welfare situations. Around 50% end up unemployed. It goes on. It has that kind of downstream effect. That's
bad effects on individual people's lives.
And that's one of the ways. That's one of the ways the structural deficit gets built, because you got to treat. You've got to
get them onto welfare. You've got to
There are a whole bunch of problems associated with it that we know come with regular use, early onset.
And that's as little as once a week.
Right. And then on top of that, cannabis can actually induce 3 psychiatric conditions. It can induce anxiety disorders. There's a thing called cannabis-induced anxiety disorder, cannabis-induced psychosis, cannabis-induced sleep disorder. And those things persist into adulthood. So cannabis-induced sleep disorder is a huge problem if you just took that, because everyone knows that if you've got bad sleep, it affects a whole bunch of other things. A whole bunch of other things. And then there are a ton of cannabis-sensitive conditions. We know that.
So there are psychological problems. There are motivation problems. There are just
right. These cannabis-sensitive conditions are huge problems because 22% of young people have one of them or are vulnerable to one of those. We're talking about depression, bipolar. We're talking about ADHD. That's a very cannabis-sensitive condition, and so forth. Those conditions can either be triggered or they can be exacerbated. They can be made worse.
So that's why your group is so focused on getting a funding stream for treatment.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, we're going to take another break and have another segment of You've Got to Be Kidding Me.
For more information about Michael Cerullo, the organization he represents, What's the Rush, Rhode Island, and much more information about this subject, please go to www.what'stherush-ri.org.
When is a contract not a contract? When our state legislature says it isn't. Are you kidding me? All legally binding contracts have always contained two key features: the agreed terms by which the parties will abide and the duration of the agreement. Not so fast, first-year law students. Now come Senators McCaffrey, Chichone, Satchel, and Jabbour with their bill S-446. It stipulates that in the case of certified school teachers, any contract, once executed with them and for them, shall remain in effect in perpetuity unless a new contract be executed between the same parties. Consolidation or regionalization be damned. Municipalities or private institutions, no matter. Management rights? What are they? So what's really going on here? Schools, both public and private, have a tremendous incentive to reach successive contracts. They have businesses to run. They have customers to serve. But the teachers? Their one and only incentive to bargain in good faith is the possibility that if no new agreement is concluded, there will be no work. Now that the aforementioned senators have moved to make that unpleasant reality go away, the teachers and their unions have management right where they want them, over a barrel. Are you kidding me?
What do I stand for? What do I stand for? Most nights I don't know anymore.
Back. Today we're talking with Mike Cerullo, who is a long-time, almost 20-year veteran in the trenches, treating youth and their families who have become involved in drug use and have had problems with it. And he's done a tremendous amount of research into marijuana, trying to find answers for us. Mike, one of the things that I think people quite don't understand what legalization means. Can you tell us what Colorado's experience has been with legalization?
So with legalization, what's happened in Colorado is there have been substantial increases in use. There have been substantial increases in the rate of the percentage of traffic fatalities that are marijuana involved alone. There's been a significant increase in public use of it, even though it's prohibited. There've been
I hear that they're using it in their parks, walking down the streets.
And some of that's got to do with the fact that they can use these highly concentrated forms like hash oil that are odorless. So, for example, you'll see kids using them or people using it with these e-cigarette pens. They can just put that in there.
So kind of like public intoxication.
Right. There's public intoxication. There's kids walking around stoned in school because you can't even smell it in the class in the bathrooms. And black market activity. Lots more than people expected were going to happen. The theory was that it was going to depress black market activity. That is not what's happened. So these are some of the things that legalization has meant.
So it hasn't been the revenue producer that Colorado expected it to be.
Yeah, Colorado was getting not as much by any stretch. They've got a lot of people who don't want to pay the tax levels for retail.
Makes it more expensive.
Right? They want to go to the medicalization, the medical marijuana, so they have more people trying to get the lower taxed material version of marijuana.
Well, and people can grow it in their basement,
Absolutely.
right? It's not like tobacco where you need a field
I think they
or
get
a
6
still.
plants. They can keep 6 plants growing at any given time. That's 6 ounces of it. Okay, so that's what, a third of a pound.
So they don't have to buy it at all.
So there are people who want to grow it themselves and don't have to buy it.
Okay. So not quite the revenue producer that Colorado thought it was going to be.
Absolutely. And certainly not the impacts. They really didn't understand what it was going to cost to regulate it.
Okay. All right. The proponents of legalization keep saying that it's not harmful. In fact, it's less harmful than alcohol and tobacco. And I know you've talked to me about some of the medical issues. Do you want to tell our viewers just a little bit more about the medical problems that can develop from usage?
Testicular cancer doubles the risk. It may double the risk. Lung cancer, long longitudinal study in Sweden, 40,000 subjects, doubles the risk of
lung cancer. Is that because ash or something getting in people's lungs? Do they know?
No, everyone acknowledges that there are carcinogens in marijuana smoke. Not quite as many, according to some research, but there are still carcinogens. About a third less, according to some research.
But it's still there.
But that means it's 2/3 of it. And how do you get just 2/3 cancer? You either get cancer or you don't. And that happens. Okay. There's also a risk in the first 3 hours sometimes, or recently, of use. If you use it, it's very possible that you're going to end up in the emergency room with a stroke.
You said there are a lot of the brain strokes from
just
using one cigarette.
At times it's just one cigarette. And this is not for people who have a vulnerability to it, according to the American Heart Association, and according to a very widely ranging study that was done in Europe not so long ago. And you can go to our website and you can see these reports, and they come from very credible sources. We could talk for hours about this. The best way to learn about this is to go to the whatsttherush-ri.org website.
So, a lot of information.
You will learn much more than I can give you.
You also mentioned COPD.
COPD is a potential problem. Pulmonary issues are a potential problem.
Are they developing earlier or just more prevalent?
I don't think I want to try to pull out of my 72-year-old memory the details, but I can recommend that you go to the website. There'll be a tab there, and it'll go right to physical health problems, and then you'll see a COPD sub-tab. You'll see a sub-tab for cancer.
Okay. All right, so medical problems, psychological problems, societal problems that all have to be studied before we
Absolutely.
go
if you
into
look at
this.
just the psychosis issue, huge problem. In England, they did exactly what people are proposing here. They changed their equivalent of Schedule 1 down to Schedule 2 or 3, and within 4 years they had to go back. The theory was it was going to reduce psychotic episodes. The reality was that they had a huge jump in them, and they had to bring it back to a Schedule 1 level. That study is sitting on the webpage.
On the website,
mental health, and then psychosis.
Okay. So, for me, I'm really concerned about our children, our youth, right? Because they tend to want to experiment. And when you talk about a 10 to 16% chance that they'll become addicted, that's scary to me as a mother, I'll be honest with you.
And to me as a grandfather.
Yeah, and the long-term effect that it's going to have on their lives.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, Colorado, one of the things that we need to understand is that you need to make that the priority. Colorado had 6 or 7 priorities when they started this out. Protecting youth was the last priority. It was the bottom priority. Making sure that the consumer was happy, the retail market was going, that was the big deal. So we need to reverse that. That's what we need to do. Here's what happened in Colorado.
Because the law is going to say that it's illegal for children to get it.
But they're going to get
it. In Colorado, there's actually been an increase in use.
Absolutely. So as recently as 2014, the reports are, this is very current research, that Colorado's 8th grade reports of using it in the last month have gone up to 22%, a little more than that. Okay,
a fourth of the kids.
The national average is 6% thereabouts. So that's about 350% higher than the national average, and that's just since 2013 or so, when it was first legalized. And that trend's been going up since medical marijuana was commercialized in 2009. So that's how much they're using.
And you say that's because once you legalize it, kids say, well, it must be okay.
That's correct. And then you're increasing access because there's more of it around. There's more of it around. Study about high school access to where the kids are getting it in high school today. 38% of it's coming from retail locations because one of their friends diverted it for them. They got it. 23%, according to that study, are getting it from their parents' supply. 22%. I'm serious.
I just think 22%. It's scary because
go to the website. You'll find these studies. They're credible studies.
1/4 of the children may be coming to school intoxicated, so less motivation, less ability to focus on their work.
And that's just the 8th grade number.
There's a horrible effect on their future lives
Right.
then, on their earning capacity.
Right. Now, proponents will say, well, isn't that a novelty effect? And I'll say, well, you know, that's a plausible possibility, but how are you going to know whether it is until you follow these kids for 5 years? You've got to look at what that cohort looks like when they're graduating high school. You can't just sit there and say, well, it's going to go down.
So again, what's the rush?
What's the rush? Absolutely.
RI.org for more information on the website. We're going to take another break now. We'll be right back to finish our conversation.
For more information about Michael Cerullo, the organization he represents, What's the Rush Rhode Island, and much more information about this subject, please go to www.what'stherush-ri.org.
When is a contract not a contract? When our state legislature says it isn't. Are you kidding me? All legally binding contracts have always contained 2 key features: the agreed terms by which the parties will abide and the duration of the agreement. Not so fast, first-year law students. Now come Senators McCaffrey, Chichone, Satchel, and Jabor with their bill S-446. It stipulates that in the case of certified school teachers, any contract, once executed with them and for them, shall remain in effect in perpetuity unless a new contract be executed between the same parties. Consolidation or regionalization be damned. Municipalities or private institutions, no matter. Management rights? What are they? So what's really going on here? Schools, both public and private, have a tremendous incentive to reach successive contracts. They have businesses to run. They have customers to serve. But the teachers? Their one and only incentive to bargain in good faith is the possibility that if no new agreement is concluded, there will be no work. Now that the aforementioned senators have moved to make that unpleasant reality go away, the teachers and their unions have management right where they want them, over a barrel. Are you kidding me?
Welcome back. Today we have Mike Cerullo, who has been giving us a lot of information on marijuana, and I hope those of you who are interested will go to his website to get even more detailed information. But Mike, I want to turn to our prisons, because proponents are saying that our prisons, our jails are full of people who've just been experimenting, small quantities, kids. And I think that's one of the reasons we decriminalized marijuana a few years ago, is because we don't want our prisons full of teenagers and college students. Is that true? Or we still have a lot of people in jail because of marijuana use?
Well, certainly not here in Rhode Island. Director Wall, A.T. Wall, presented it at the medical school forum just last Tuesday, and here are the numbers that he gave us for the people involved under his jurisdiction. There is, of the people who are on probation, only 23 of 208 were there because of marijuana use or small amounts of possession.
Okay.
On home confinement, only 1 of 161.
All right.
Awaiting trial in custody at the intake center, 0 of 570. Sentenced in custody to the ACI, 0 of 2,559. Now that's a slice in time there, and that's where it is. National,
so you're talking 24 people across the state, and none of them are in jail.
Absolutely none. So there's not going to be any windfall of saved money from taking people out of prison because they're not there. Okay, that's a fallacy.
And you worry about the impact on people's lives who get involved in the judicial system as well. So it's not there, is what you're telling me.
Not there.
But you were telling me that because in Colorado they've legalized that, and there's now this black market that's developed. I wondered if you'd tell the people a little bit more about what that black market is doing and how dangerous that is.
So the black market has been there right along. And one of the fallacies, or one of the myths, is that the black market will go away once it's legalized. What's really happened
the bad guys get out of the business.
What's really happened is that the black market has evolved to another level. So it's a little like Toyota putting a manufacturing plant in Rhode Island. Essentially what we've done for the cartels is we've given them a manufacturing location in Colorado and Northern California, a lot of places. So the cartels are still in the business of growing and processing and shipping marijuana. It's about 40 states are receiving packages, those that do get interdicted. 40 states are getting them from Colorado now, and it's the black markets that's shipping them. Instead, what the cartels are doing is that they've increased shipments across the border of more easy things to ship across the border, like heroin and methamphetamines.
And we know we've had a terrific problem here in Rhode Island with heroin.
That's correct.
We medicalized marijuana. Marijuana is easy to get, so you're saying that the black market tiers are now bringing in more heroin, cocaine, and...
They've actually had an increase in the number of heroin deaths among critical college-age students since legalization, since commercialization of medical marijuana.
There's been an increase
in heroin deaths. There's been an increase in heroin deaths. There's been a leveling off of prescription pill deaths because of education, because of doctors being educated more, because of developing pharmaceuticals that are not as addictive, versions of OxyContin, for example. But the heroin deaths themselves are increasing. That substitution effect is not taking place there. It's also not taking place with alcohol, which was another theory. Going back to the black market, there has been a significant increase in black market activity. It has not
with more dangerous drugs.
And with more dangerous, more concentrated forms. It's a whole lot easier to ship 90% concentrates of butane oil in a jar, sealed jar, out of Colorado than it is.
I tell you, that butane oil, it just scares me. I mean, it's like putting petroleum in your body. But go ahead, I digress.
You're right. No, it's a carcinogen. We just don't know how much is left in the process after they've drained. Nobody knows how much is left.
Yeah.
They haven't developed a standard for it yet in terms of what would be safe. Look at what's happened in the growing operations, and they just in Denver just.
I mean, we're raising the age where you can smoke, and we're telling people that they can take butane if it's got hash in it. I don't know. But at any rate,
complicated.
It's complicated. We're about at the end of our time, so I guess you have so much information, and honestly, I hope people really search this out. But kind of summarize your main points for our viewers. What do you want them to know about marijuana? Besides, let's just wait and see what happens in Colorado. You mentioned all of these kind of problems that are there, could get worse. So tell us, kind of summarize those.
Well, the first thing we've got to do is make youth our priority. This stuff affects youth into their adulthood and beyond in various ways.
All those social problems.
That has to be the priority. In Colorado, one of their problems was they focused on the money side, the retail business, that kind of thing. And their last priority, I believe they had 6 in the original design, the last priority was protecting youth. We are on the road to doing the same thing. The proponents, as you well know, are talking
about the money.
Strictly about money, and we'll take care of the other stuff through regulations. I'm not sure that that's the case. So that's one of the primary concerns. That is the primary concern.
I honestly believe you never make public policy dependent on how many taxes you can get from it. That's just, that's mind-boggling that we make money more important than people.
Our members we have proponents. We have a lot of undecided people. We have opponents in our group. But we all agree. Stop, look, listen. If there's 350% more, if 8th graders in Colorado are doing 350%, the national average, you're not going to know whether that's a novelty effect or whether it persists until you study that cohort all the way through high school. That's 5 years. Yes. 5 years. We can afford to wait 5 years to know what that problem looks like down the road. So that's the primary one.
Because when you visit a problem on a child, it stays with them for 60 and 70 years, their whole lives.
There are certainly effects of marijuana to do that in brain development, in cancer.
Sure, you were mentioning the IQ,
and IQ levels, and in social areas like employment. Okay?
Going back to IQ, you said it was an 8% decrease?
8% drop. 8% drop.
That can be incredible. I was a special education teacher.
Of course,
that can
that's
be,
right. I forgot about that about you.
Yeah, and a real difference in earning capacity, financial security, decision-making, all through your life.
All that stuff. All through that in so many different ways. So what we're really asking people to do is endorse our positions. A fiscal analysis has to be done before anybody makes this decision, making sure that there are going to be guaranteed funding for the inevitable increases in addiction, healthcare costs. And the best way to do that is to get educated so that you can educate these 113 people who have got to make the decision. That's a big responsibility on their part. If I were back in the political world and I had that job, I'd want to know everything possible. And you know, all of us are a whole lot smarter than any one of us. So that's
right.
why this movement works best. Go to our website.
Okay, so let's
www.whatsttherush-ri.org. www.whatsttherush-ri.org.
And there's just a wealth of information on there.
More than you want. Some people want to know.
For our viewers, that's where you begin. You have to understand the issue, and once you understand it and you've made your decision should be based on research, on facts, on data. It shouldn't be just on, I feel bad about it, I feel good about it. It really, and there's a wealth of information out there. And once you've made your choice, then you should get active. Either get involved with What's the Rush Rhode Island, or both, call your elected officials. Tell them what you think. You can get representatives and senators' emails and phone numbers right on the website, the Rhode Island Legislative website. Get involved. Tell them. Email them. Call them. Talk with them. Call the governor. Call the Department of Health. I mean, seriously, there are so many issues out there. I actually, and Mike knows, I've endorsed the What's the Rush. I think I want to see what happens in Colorado and Washington State and Oregon and Alaska before I visit that here on Rhode Island. Maybe good, maybe bad. I want to know for certain before I change the dynamic here. At any rate, I want to really thank you, Mike, so much for coming.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for being willing to listen.
We're doing all of this work and trying to get it out to people. You are an ardent supporter, and people are lucky to have you. And I want to thank you for listening. Thank you. See you next time.
For more information about Michael Cerullo, the organization he represents, What's the Rush Rhode Island, and much more information about this subject, please go to www.whatsttherush-ri.org.
Rhode Island senators are dabbling in business management again. Will the results be as disastrous this time too? Are you kidding me? Proposed legislation known as S-Force 20 restricts the compensation of medical facility staff who are not also licensed healthcare workers. That means the business managers, marketing and sales managers, facility engineers, culinary and housekeeping staff and the like can expect their earning capacity to be severely restricted by the averages generated in such a highly regulated industry. Common Sense has already pointed out that similar and smaller caps have been placed on gross income for these businesses. That's the direct result of fumbled legislative attempts to hold down medical costs by lowering the permissible billing for individual procedures covered. So it shouldn't be a surprise that industry average compensation for the managers targeted here is already well below that for the same skills in other segments of the private sector. I wonder if this bill's sponsors, Senators McCaffrey, Pichardo, Golden, Felag, and Alaska, understand that adding their new restriction to the mix guarantees that Rhode Island's healthcare industry will not have access to the best and brightest administrative talent. I wonder if they realize that in an environment of limited income, business enterprises need to have an unlimited capacity to operate efficiently. Are they trying to make it impossible to run a hospital in the Ocean State? Are you kidding me?
I would like to spend a few minutes bemoaning the sad state of affairs at the tax office. That would be the federal tax office. The latest GAO report on 2014 tax filings reported that the IRS paid out $2.8 billion, I say again, billion, in fraudulent identity theft tax refunds. You may not even have filed when someone is pocketing your refund check. Now, the IRS's criminal investigations team found connections to bad guys in Russia, Nigeria, Bulgaria, Romania, and Latvia. Worse yet, this report states that these folks are stockpiling data for the 2016 filing season. That would be next year. Oh, give me a break. So I looked at the amount of data I give to the computer program I use for filing my own taxes. Now, it is full of all sorts of numbers, like how much TDI, temporary disability insurance, was taken out of my wife's salary, and on it goes, of course. All of the numbers needed to keep the filing from bouncing are unique to my return. And all the employee identifications have been the same for decades. Now, the government received a copy of the W-2s exactly when I did. Something must be wrong with a computer program that can't tell it's really me. Someone would need access to all of the W-2s, all the 1099s, all the investment reports, and all the other stuff that is uniquely mine, like the account numbers, for instance, where they will send the refund check, if there is one. I don't get the argument that suggests the data breaches at big retailers give hackers the information they need to electronically file my tax return. I can't believe that Target had all the information about me that would allow someone to file my return. I am more inclined to believe that hackers have found their way into the computers that create the W-2s, the 1099s. This is really scary stuff. Well, we have added a dozen IRS agents to take on the job, and that is to find these sophisticated global hacking rings and stop the cybercrime. Well, I hope they succeed. They better succeed. Now, lots of us have always harbored ill feelings about our tax structure and don't want to hear about how easy it is to steal the money we gave up to withholding taxes. Now, I wish that was the only recent bad news that the IRS has given us. It's not. We also hear that the IRS issued $5.6 billion, once again billion, in 2010 potentially bogus educational tax credits. Okay, you know these credits we get for sending our kids or ourselves to educational programs. Thought it was a good idea. Apparently we are cheating at an alarming rate. Now, I remember when my kids were in college, I dutifully determined if my income qualified me for any credits. It usually didn't get me very much. But here's what's available to all the good taxpayers from years of new IRS changes to this particular educational law. You might qualify for one or more of the following: the American Opportunity Credit, the Hope Credit, the Lifetime Learning Credit, the enhanced benefits for 529 college savings plans, and the tuition and fees deductions, which are really not credits, but are reductions from adjusted gross income. So there's a lot in the game here for educational issues. Over the years, the number of things that can qualify for credit have expanded, as has the income levels that qualify for these breaks, these credits. You can even get a check from the IRS, even if you do not owe any federal income taxes. How about that, Virginia? Now, I don't have any idea how America's tax-paying public could possibly keep track of all the changes in tax law. It gets more and more complicated, thus forcing us to pay for a professional tax preparer or buy a sophisticated computer tax program. Now, those programs do expect you to be able to read and answer all the questions the program asks of you. Then and only then do you get to send the data to the IRS computers. Now, perhaps all the theft the IRS has to deal with is a direct result of our giving up on paper returns. I decided to open the filing cabinet drawer that I put each year's tax returns in. I couldn't reach the last file until I took out the most recent ones. I couldn't believe I still have our 1973 folder. Normally you hear that 3 years back is sufficient to save your tax information, unless of course you have housing issues and other issues. But I wonder what my kids will think when they eventually find this draw. I did check to see what the allowable credits were back then. There was a retirement credit, an investment credit, a foreign tax credit, a credit for contributions to candidates for public office, and a work incentive credit called WIN, but no educational credits. Guess things were different back then when our colleges and universities didn't have as many lobbyists advocating for grants and credits. I did discover that my wife and I had an adjusted income of $12,419 in 1973. Wonder what we spent all that money on. Just one last point today to send to you, and that is, once again, Rhode Island has made it to a list, and once again, we are at the very bottom of the list. You know that we are the last state to allow our campus police to carry arms in all the public universities in this country. Rhode Island has finally let our campus police at URI carry firearms. Oh, isn't that good? Well, thank you for watching and God bless.